All right, it's been a day of respect as President Akufo-Addo joins police officers in a memorial for 8 officers who were killed in the line of duty in the last year. Now, the officers were either run over by vehicles or killed by armed men. Now, at a solemn ceremony, the deceased, 7 males and 1 female, were remembered for their heroism. Here are some excerpts of the somber ceremony.
On behalf of the Inspector General of Police and the police administration, I wish to extend our heartfelt condolences and sympathy to the widows, widowers, children, families, and friends of all our fallen heroes. The death of a police officer is not only a great loss to the immediate family in particular, but to the nation at large. This solemn ceremony should remind all of us, the living, of the reality of death. No one can escape the clutches of the grave. Death is inevitable. Death is irreversible. Death is irresistible. All of us will exit this physical world in different circumstances, through different means and different times. Among the things worth dying for is one's country. Those we are remembering today died whilst championing the cause of protecting life and property, the love of our nation, Ghana. Life is short. Leave a mark of positive remembrance. I do agree with the saying of the former US President Barack Obama that, quote, "No country can exist without a police institution of some kind," unquote. Nevertheless, the success of any police institution partly depends on the cooperation of the general public. Police officers are our own sisters and brothers. Police officers are not enemies, hence should be treated as friends and relatives, and not to be treated as enemies. Intentionally killing a police officer, any security officer, or any citizen is unacceptable, and it is a direct attack on the peace and stability of a community or society. Criminals are not to be covered, but be exposed and brought to book. To the bereaved families gathered here, These officers we are mourning today, your departed relatives, did not die as criminals, but as gallant officers who perished while performing their official duties to the nation. Their names have been engraved on the walls of this cenotaph. Contemporary and future generations will forever extol their bravery and sacrifice for our motherland, Ghana. They have left an indelible mark on the strong walls of the Ghana Police Service, worthy of emulation. The police administration embraces all bereaved families of fallen heroes with a loving and concerned heart.
Now, all of the dearly departed have been promoted posthumously. Now, let's speak live via Skype with security expert Adam Bona. Let's talk about the development and the emerging trends. Mr. Bona, very good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're starting to hear more stories of daring criminals facing up to police officers with guns, shooting them, and of course running over them with vehicles and so forth, resulting in the deaths that were honored today. How do you see this trend, and what do you think explains it?
Yes, good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. Well, it's unfortunate. Condolences to all the 7 fallen heroes and 1 lady heroine. I hope that the maker will find a place for them. But what probably is culminating into having this type of daring attempt to run over police officers and sometimes even snatch their own weapons or fire at them head on at point blank range has to do with probably call it most of our young people these days either are learning from other cultures. Some of them have traveled to neighboring countries. Some of them have been involved in all forms of, occultic activities. And if you watch our TV space, the airwaves, you see, voodoo practitioners, juju men calling people to come for ritual money and all that. And so sometimes you have some of these young people who believe that they have some charms that protects them from taking in AK-47 bullets or taking in all forms or even getting arrested. And so once people have this type of mentality or people go through some of these rituals, then what then you will see would be this display of unfortunate bravado. And so one of the many ways to deal with this type of evolving issue has to do with asking the NCA to crack the whip, make sure some of these things are taken off the airwaves. And also, when criminals begin to feel that they are invincible when they commit a crime, it's going to be difficult to arrest them. Then what happens is that, Kojo, you would have a situation where they will go out and commit crimes and they will not be arrested, apart from police officers who have become victims. We have seen a lot of innocent Ghanaians. Some of them call it very important persons, have been killed. And up to date, the police has not been able to arrest the suspected perpetrators. And so as far as I'm concerned, we are beginning to see this trend. There are a lot of things. The whole criminal justice delivery system is not helping the situation. Criminals are arrested, they are taken to court, and the next day, some judge who might not look at the evidence abuse and then free these criminals. And so it's a whole lot of things that have gone into, what we are seeing today, Kojo.
Now, so obviously, it begs the question: is it because there are more of these adverts and so forth, suggesting ways in which people of criminal intent can gain some manner of protection? Is it because there are more of these adverts that we're seeing more impunity in recent times than before? Because as far as I'm aware, we've always been aware of the existence of charms and occult solutions and so forth. So I'm wondering, what would you attribute the increase in the impunity to?
It's a combination of all of them. In the past, you didn't see those who were practicing this advertising. Now you go just drive. Even in the city center, you see posters, advertising all these things, and nobody's talking about it. Apart from that, you have a situation where, unfortunately, some of the security officers themselves are in bed with some of these criminals, And we've had situations where some police officers were arrested for renting out their AK-47s to criminals. We have had situations where armories, police armories have been broken into and weapons, stolen. We have had situations where guns that are supposed to have been signed off to a police officer never came back to the armory. And recently, the current IGP has suspended and interdicted some officers. We have a situation where some of these cases end up in court, and these criminals are freed. They are asked to, go, on bail, either court bail, and the case continuously get adjourned until they go on again and commit another crime. And so you have a whole myriad of issues that probably is making us see an increase in this type of crimes. And also the unemployment situation, even though that cannot be an excuse. We live in a community or in a country where unemployment seems to be going up and up and up. And so once unemployment is going up and up and up, and you have a situation where a police officer, instead of us having averagely about 1 to 500 police officers, 1 officer to 500 citizens, we are doing a national average of 1 to 1,000. And so when people begin to feel that when I commit a crime, chances are that I'm not going to be arrested, or arresting will be difficult, then they would want to commit a crime. And so as far as I'm concerned, there are a whole lot of things. If you look at the police's own, crime statistics, we have had some, call it new evolving crimes, and some of us have asked that the police themselves, their training manual itself is a cake. Their manual has not undergone any serious training. And so the way a police officer was trained 20 years ago is the same way they are trained today. Instead of using modern, ways of training police officers to deal with current crime trends, they are trained using old methods. And so it's a whole lot of things to do.
Right. Now, do you think perhaps the elephant in the room might also be the fact that we're seeing more and more participation of foreign individuals in violent crime in Ghana? Could that also be a contributing factor? We know that there was a police station in Kwabenya that was attacked, and we understand that there was some foreign involvement in that. Such things were almost unheard of, that the criminals would bring the fight to the police at a station. Do you see some influence there as well?
Yes, there's a lot of influence. There's a lot of influence. If you look at our neighbor, Nigeria is closing its border. And one of the reasons why they are closing their border has to do with the fact that if you look at how porous the borders, the West Coast, with the West African borders have been, There are, if you go to the Sahel region, Niger, Mali, call them Ivory Coast, around that area, Burkina Faso. There are a lot of crimes going on. Go to the Cameroon area, a lot of crimes going on. And so we are beginning to have a lot of people moving into safe havens such as ours, Ghana, where relatively it's a very peaceful country, and therefore they come in and, they are daring. If you go to some of these countries, especially Nigeria, our own neighbor Nigeria, I mean, these things are something that happens almost all the time in Nigeria, where police officers are targeted and attacked. But if you come to our own backyard, these are things that hitherto you wouldn't see. But today, I mean, that influence is there. And so some of us have asked that, can the immigration service begin to play that role and make sure that those who are coming in, they kind of put in more measures to know who is coming in and who is leaving. On the Controller General of the Nigerian Immigration Service has given an amnesty to every foreigner living in Nigeria to come in and register their presence in Nigeria. And the amnesty is ending on the 11th of January 2020. Where we are in Ghana, we haven't heard that. We haven't heard anything the executive or the immigration service or the security apparatus, the national security is doing to ensure that we are safe. Because then once Nigeria begins to tighten, their own backyard, chances are that you are going to have a lot of these criminals beginning to migrate, and they will migrate to countries like ours. And so I would have thought that our own officers, or those in charge of our security, would have been learning something from their counterparts in Nigeria. And so this amnesty is ending on the 11th of January 2020. And so I'm using your medium to appeal to the National Security Minister and the President himself, so that they put in measures, or else we are going to have an influx of hardened criminals from Nigeria coming into our own country to probably worsen the situation as we find ourselves now. So, Kojo, yes, to answer to that question directly, it is true. Some of these daring attacks we've seen are usually foreign influence. If you, a lot of the serious armed robberies we've seen, I think a year or 2 years ago in Tema, where some people were gunned down. If you look at the Royal Motors, daring raid, these are things that are foreign influence. I wouldn't say foreigners should be labeled as being criminals, but there is that element. If you take the police's own data, it supports the fact that a lot of these crimes are also committed, with the influence of foreigners, i.e., if you look at even the recent kidnappings that has receded a bit, I mean, largely committed by foreigners who are in Ghana.
Now, the IGP was at the ceremony, so was the Interior Minister, the Vice President, and the President. Now, you and I are connecting the dots. We're seeing cause and effect everywhere. Do you see any evidence that leadership, whether it's the police council or whether it's the top brass of the police service itself, do you see any evidence that they are also reacting or responding to some of these trends? Do you see any change in strategy? Do you see any change in training or anything at all that suggests that our police are gearing up to respond to this new threat posed by the sub-region?
Well, I think so. Somewhere, I think the beginning of the year, I'm aware of some counterintelligence procurement, equipment that has been procured. These are things that usually would not be put to the public domain. I know some agreements, that are ongoing. I think they've been signed so that some of our borders are going to have, surveillance equipment that would monitor those who are coming in and going out. But the truth is that recently I had to do a presentation on behalf of the Transparency International, and one of the things that we raised that came out, making Ghana score an E, had to do with the fact that up to date we don't have a comprehensive national security policy document. We don't have it. And once we don't have it, what happens without that comprehensive national security policy document is that you are going to have a situation where we would have knee-jerk responses to dealing with, the security challenges as at when they come up. And so one of the ways that probably some of us would accept that the executive and probably even the legislature, although everyone, we are going to be comfortable, has to do with when we have this comprehensive document being put together. I know there is a committee working on a draft proposal for this to be adopted, but it looks like it's delaying. And so mine is that probably the executive is doing something, but to me, it is the executive isn't doing that much in terms of making sure that we are all protected. When we sleep, we sleep. As we speak, when you are in Accra, you hardly hear of highway robberies. But when you travel outside Accra, in the past, you won't see highway robberies around the Cape Coast, that environment, the western, the central area. But recently, it was in the media where, armed bandits stopped vehicles and robbed them, and there were police officers around. They couldn't do anything. You go up north, there are violent robberies going on, oftentimes on this stretch. And so mine is that we have over-concentrated resources in Accra and some of the major cities, but unfortunately, those who need some of these things don't have them. And so we need to probably decentralize our way of protecting Ghanaians. But then you hear there's a conflict in the north, and military officers, police officers are flown in. One of the questions I've asked has to do with the fact that why can't we have the Ministry of Defense moved to the north? Because when there is a threat to Ghana, is going to come from the northern sector. And the simple reason is that the Sahel, we are surrounded by the Sahel region. Mali, Burkina Faso, you can mention them. The terrorist activities going on around that area. But we have the Ministry of Defense in Accra. Well, the simple reason is that maybe it's been here all along, but why can't we move it there so that we can have a large contingent of military officers there to ensure that when there is any threat, we don't have to begin to fly sorties, move military officers up north.
Right.
So it's a question some of us have been asking over the period.
Okay.